There we go. All right. Alrighty then. Okay, so layoffs. Fun stuff. Yay. Okay, so can one of you explain employment at will and the exceptions? What it means?
Sorry, Tina.
I say employment at will is where either party can terminate the contract for any reason at any time. So either the employer or the employee can terminate. There are some exceptions depending on how the contract is written, what government and city regulations are, and if your company is large enough to fall under the Warren Act.
Mm-hmm. Yep, very good. Okay, so this is a contract between, so breach of implied contract says this is a contract between the employer and the employee that is created by the actions of the employer. The employer could imply that the employee will have continued employment by making statements about how well the employee is doing. The employer could also create an implied contract. Probably that's supposed to be
Got a contract.
Yeah, contract through an employment manual that details termination practices. For example, a 3 strikes policy that says you have to give notice before firing. So that's breach of implied contract. Let's see, breach of implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing. That just sounds very
heavy.
Yeah, it sounds very like, what's it called? Thornton Wilder, not Thornton Wilder. Anyway, it just sounds like a back like Pilgrim-esque.
Right.
Okay, so this could come into play where an employer unfairly tries to avoid doing what they agreed to do under the contract an employee. So basically, you know, hey, I just did my job, and they're like, oh, yeah, you're fired. Thanks.
So would that be if someone went and made a certain number of sales and then they fire them because they don't want to pay the commission? Is that what that would fall under? Okay.
I would think so, yeah. So then there's violation of public policy, which is terminating an employee for refusing to commit an unlawful act, serving on jury duty, blowing the whistle, filing for workers' comp, refusing to date one's boss, etc. So basically, you can't violate for them doing what they need to do or what's right. Let's see. And then there's discrimination statutes. Don't forget about the anti-discrimination statutes we covered previously. So there's Title VII, which is about race, national origin, gender, and religion. The Americans with Disability Act, and the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. So going back to the case study, so each of the questions let's talk about Terry first, then we'll talk about Phil. So what impact does Terry have on the company's bottom line?
He's a cost and not much of a positive impact.
Yes, he has no benefit.
Yeah.
At least in his current position. They did him a disservice by hiring him.
They did.
They should have, if they wanted to hire him because he was the CEO's buddy, they should have then found the right position for him instead of just sticking him in a hole.
I agree. And they kept giving a disservice by continually giving 3.5s so that the vice presidents or CEO or whoever didn't get upset. They weren't helping anybody in that situation.
And well, it also didn't kick in their planning thing either for saying firing by keeping it 3.5.
Right.
But and then with the company's bottom line, like how did that affect the company? Not just Terry, but how did that affect the actual company itself?
Well, they're giving him money and not getting anything back. So they're not, they're just shelling out money for no purpose. And he could be costing them money.
Right.
Like
it's not only he's costing him obviously some revenue because his costs go against the revenue. And when you think about not only his salary, but his benefits too, that they're having to pay for, and the taxes, there's a lot of things that go on in that payroll that people don't see and don't know.
Right.
Right. And they could also the fact that he's not qualified, he's not contributing to their bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, and they keep putting him on things that don't matter. So he's completely useless.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So what obligation does the manager have to the company based on that information?
To get rid of him. There's no point in keeping him except to make somebody happy because he's buddies with someone.
Yeah, so he's going to they either have to get him out of the company or move him to a position that he can do.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's their only two choices.
Yeah. Although I have to say that, the feedback from the people who were asked to hire him, the hiring board or whatever they called it, Terry got no hires straight across the board from 5 people.
And she's never been hired to begin with.
No. So I don't know if that's because of skills or personality or whatever, but red flags went off for the entire group of people who said, don't hire him, and they did it anyway. I mean, that's bad. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, so based on what you've learned about employment at will and exceptions, what legal obligations could the managers have to Terry?
I think they are obligated to keep him for a while and put him on that 2.5 plan. They cannot fire him right now because he could come back and win a lawsuit because he's had better ratings this whole time he's been employed.
Yeah, it's not because he hasn't done anything. He hasn't stolen from the company where he's taken equipment or something of that nature. He hasn't created sexual harassment. He hasn't done anything that would cause an immediate termination.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
He's not coming to work drunk or stoned and putting other people at risk. He's not doing those things. So when you look at that, you then have to put him on the plan of improvement, the planned improvement plan.
Mm-hmm.
Which puts things in a precarious situation because then you spend all your time documenting, and when he doesn't have the right position, and then even then, if you want him to go to another position, how do you justify him taking another position in the company when you're giving him 2.5s or less, and you have him on an improvement plan?
A very good point.
Mm-hmm. They're kind of shooting themselves in the foot by doing that.
Yeah.
All right, here's so.
Okay, so ethical obligations. What ethical obligations does the managers have to Terry?
Ethically, they haven't been honest with him, so they need to start being honest with him.
Mm-hmm. So what obligations does the managers have to the company and other employees?
They need to be honest.
Yeah.
They need to be honest with him and say, this isn't working. Here's what's not working. Here's why it's not working. And then one of the things maybe they need to look at, is there a training that could make it to where it would work for him?
Mm-hmm.
Or even ask the bottom line, is this the job you really want?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And could training just waste more money on him?
Yeah. Well, and she's been trying to train him. She kept saying that Rachel put him on things that didn't matter, but she was trying to teach him more technical stuff. She talked to him, she counseled him, she gave him things to read, but he had no analytical skills. He was in the wrong position. And I bet he was well liked. There may be something else at the company that he'd be good at. Maybe talking to customers, So.
Okay. Now let's go on to Phil. So what does Phil have on the impact on the company's bottom line? What impact does Phil have on the company's bottom line?
I think he's a little more productive. He can do some things. But frankly, he's been out on medical leave for so long that that's just been a losing. I mean, there's no productivity in that.
Well, they were going to put him on the plan before he went out on medical leave.
Right.
Which, had he not gone on medical leave, they probably would have put him on the plan and exited him from the employer. But once he was diagnosed with the cancer, they put him on medical leave. Everybody rallied around him. They went to the hospital, all that stuff. That put it in a whole different situation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because now there was a buy-in from the people. He was almost untouchable after that.
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody wants to fire the person that survived cancer.
Yeah.
That came close to death at that point.
Yeah, they have to. Let's see. So does the manager have any obligation to the company based on the fact that he was going to be fired at one point, but now they can't fire him?
Well, the manager still has the obligation to do the right thing, and the right thing in this situation might be even more than Terry moving him to a different position, because he kept saying he wasn't completely hopeless, but she's getting tons of pressure from bosses who are just mad about it and skip him because he's so outspoken, to get rid of him. But why not find something that he really can be good at? This is a big company. There's got to be something that he can do there. I mean, he was a manager of a phone call or something?
Call center.
Call center. So he obviously had that job for a reason. Why they stuck him in doing all this technical stuff is beyond me. But
he was part of a merger.
Right. But why put him there?
It was just
because they didn't have a call center anymore, so they put him there. But that was kind of the employer's fault too, putting him in the wrong position.
Yeah.
After the merger.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Legally obligation. Oh, goodness. Legal obligation. So based on what we've learned about employment at will and exceptions, what legal obligations could the manager have to fill?
Well,
go ahead.
I was gonna say once they started giving him, people's vacation time and that type of thing, they had a bigger obligation to keep him employed.
Mm-hmm. And it could also with the way everyone rallied around him, that kind of helped with the company morale.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look what the company's doing for him. I work for such a great company. And then if they fire him, my company fired the guy with cancer.
Right.
What kind of monsters do I work for? So, yeah, for their own PR, they got to keep him at least for a while.
Except they have this policy, which is kind of slapped on at the very end of this case study, that if after 6 years, the policy is if you haven't been promoted in 3 years, you get fired. And he's been there 6 years. So they're not even upholding their own policies.
Mm-hmm.
Which I frankly think that's a stupid policy. Just because somebody doesn't qualify to be promoted or want to be promoted doesn't mean they're a bad employee.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
I saw when I had my last job, there was a guy that one of my clients, he was out interviewing, and he went to interview at a company, and they wouldn't hire him because he didn't change jobs every 3 years.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. You would think it'd be the opposite.
He had never had that before, and because he had changed companies every 3 years or jobs every 3 years, they wouldn't hire him.
And they thought he wasn't ambitious.
Yeah, or something.
Yeah.
That's just, ugh.
Yeah.
It's all concept.
So let's see, ethical obligations. What ethical obligations does the manager have to fill?
Ethically, she has a bigger responsibility to fill than she does to Terry. Because of what he's been through. Say it again.
Yeah.
Oh, I think ethically she has more responsibility to fill than she does to Terry because of how you said the company rallied around him and what they've done, how long he's been there. Like ethically, there's a much bigger responsibility there.
Right. So what about to the company? With Phil's situation, does she have a ethical obligation to the company in this case?
Yeah, she still has to excuse me, she still has to make sure that he's performing the best work possible when he's at work, and that he's treated fairly. You know, he obviously, you know, is going to have some challenging days while he's recovering.
Mm-hmm. What about to the employees, to the other employees, or to herself? Does she have any ethical obligations in that respect?
I think again, she's gotta be honest and upfront and treat everybody as close to the same as she can.
Well, the thing is, she kept talking in the beginning about how blunt she was and how she wanted people to be honest, and she was always honest with her employees.
Oh, you're breaking up, Ticia.
Am I really? I'm going to go back.
Now you're okay. It just, in the beginning, you were kind of muted almost. Like we could hear you talking and sort of understand you, but not quite.
I'm just going to try it over here. We'll see if this is any better. Can you hear me any better now?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, good. Kind of move stacks of crap out of the way. Okay, so now I forgot what I was going to say. What were we talking about?
Does she have an ethical obligation to herself and the other employees?
Oh, and I was saying that she said that she was so blunt and she was so honest and everything. And truthfully, I think she tried working with Terry by giving him, you know, things to do, things to read, stuff to work on. But has she been that honest with Phil? I mean, she says in here that his performance was so poor, like it was even worse than before he went on medical leave. So has she talked to him and said, your performance is so poor and we realize you've been sick. We got to work out something. So we're getting something from you and not just giving you everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because after reading this, you know, in the quiz, it wanted to know what her management style was and said blunt. And I'm like, it wasn't blunt. She was sympathetic.
Oh, yeah?
Well, you can still be blunt and sympathetic, though. But that's what she explicitly said. She's like, I don't beat around the bush at all. I'm just straight out, straight
Right.
shoot. This is the way it is. No sugarcoating at all.
Right.
Which, I mean, some people don't respond well to that. Some people are just like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where did that come from? That it's, you know, some people don't, they when they deal with blunt people, they feel like they're being bludgeoned as opposed to corrected and, you know.
Well, and there's a difference between blunt and rude and blunt and kind.
Right.
You can still be a straight shooter and not be a rude jerk. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Step 3. So an analysis of the company's HR practices. So how well is the company in this case doing with its HR practices generally?
Not good.
How so?
It sounds like to me like they're doing okay. They have performance reviews in place. They have the standards of how they work. They have policies about hiring and firing. But they're not, there's no, what's the right word? Their managers are able to do whatever they want without any oversight. So there's nobody coming back in and saying, well, wait, why did you give this person a 3.5 when everybody knows that he's not a 3.5? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it was almost like the managers agreed, like when you look at Terry, they agreed that he should always get a 3.5 so he wouldn't be written up.
Right.
And Phil, because he did some things that some of the upper management didn't like, is maybe he called them on their crap. They didn't want him to have a 3.5. So so I have to wonder then, are they holding a double standard? And is HR really doing the proper oversight? Because it said in the case study too, that before the appraisal could be given out, it had to go up for approval to come back down.
Right. Which doesn't make sense to me.
Well, that approval was also just to kind of like check, like, are you, and they would say, okay, we're good with this, or are you sure? So like whenever she said that she was going to give Terry the 2.5, they're like, are you sure? How about 3? let's do a 3. And she was like, no.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more, they do have good policies. They just need to enforce them more consistently.
I agree.
Yeah, that has to be more consistent. You can't,
Yeah.
because if you're not going to do it consistently, that's when you open yourself up for lawsuits.
Yeah, and you might as well not even have policies at that
Right.
point.
Yeah. So how do they hire?
Apparently they have a policy in place and they use a team and whatever, but then the CEO and vice presidents get to override it and do whatever they want anyway.
Again, with their hiring, they have to be consistent.
Yeah.
If you got to be, a 5-person panel and 3 of the 5 say no hire, don't hire them.
Yeah. Well, and what does that do
You know,
to the morale of those hiring people? They're like, well, why did I waste my time doing that? I could have been doing something else.
Oh yeah.
Mhm. So let's see. We kind of talked about this a little bit, but how do they manage people and give them feedback? We kind of covered that with the rating systems and the reviews.
But it sounds like they don't really, I mean, they have semi-annual or annual performance reviews, but it sounds like at least in her department, she's able to give feedback verbally, and there's probably not a whole lot of documentation. Does she have documentation of all the times that she's talked to, now I'm confusing him, Terry, I think, and said, you need to read these books. Now go and try this. You know, did she document all that? Because if she did, she could justify her 2.5 because
Right.
nothing was improved.
But that goes back to the manager having to take some responsibility when they have somebody that's not they have to just as much for a good employee as they do for a bad employee, and that's keep the documentation.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So do employees get a clear picture from the company of how they are performing?
I think it's going to depend on who the manager is.
Yeah. I would expect that all of her other people knew how well they were performing, but I don't think Terry and Phil understood how well they were performing.
No, I think Terry knew because they started talking about the other team members, and when doing that, he saw how he wasn't the rock star of the other team members. So I think Terry understood that.
Okay.
I'm not sure if Phil did that.
There's also the idea though that because he felt that the CEO had his back, that it didn't matter what he did or what his reviews were. He's like, well, I can get a 2.5. That's fine as long as I got my buddy here.
Mm-hmm.
He'll make sure it's all well. I can just do whatever. So while the other employees might think like, oh darn it, I almost got a 3 that time. I got to really step up my game.
Right.
He's just like, I'm good.
Yeah.
Doing the bare minimum. I'm doing it. I'm getting it done. What's the problem? So even though they might have a clear picture, they still might not have the right feedback.
Yeah.
And I've seen people, as long as they get a satisfactory review and they're not in trouble, it's okay. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, a job is just a job, and they're going to do what's required and nothing more. And that's okay, as long as they're doing what's required. So.
Right.
It's kind of funny because sometimes it's like, what more could you do? Sometimes there isn't more. It's like you're doing your job. That's what you need to do.
Right.
And then it's like, if you do more, then you're almost like that becomes the new level of doing your job. And so there has to be that fine line of, I just do the bare minimum, but then there also has to be I don't do the rock bottom.
Right.
That's what's kind of weird sometimes about working in the being employed. It's like you want to do well, you want to perform well, but you also don't want to overwork yourself. But anyway, you can just random. Okay, so what is the PIP for?
She said it was to get rid of employees. It was setting up a case so that he couldn't be sued after they fired someone.
Because most people don't improve with the plan, even though they put a plan in place. They're basically documentation and looking for any one thing that they can fire the person over. not how do you help the person get back on the right track.
Yeah, I agree.
So do you agree with the way the company uses the PIPs?
Nope.
Nope. Are we supposed to be trying to create better employees for us so we don't waste money firing someone and then hiring someone else? Or are we just going to not care about that money and just get rid of people?
Mm-hmm. It's like putting them out on a plank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Do you think this manager can make good decisions about these two individuals, or does she seem to be influenced by bias that will be hard to overcome?
I think she can make good decisions. She seems like
Yeah.
somebody who can stand on her own 2 feet.
It looks like she's making decisions that nobody else before her made.
Right.
They talked about Rachel being passed over for the promotion. If Rachel had been more diligent, maybe, and looking at Phil and Terry and doing the write-ups and doing those things that could have had them either improve or leave the company sooner, she might have been able to keep the idea of being promoted in that job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In the case of Phil, though, do you think she's being influenced by other people's bias? Where the one guy who's like, I can't stand him. You need to let him go. Do you think?
No, because she still was saying that she wants him on a 2.5 to see what can be done because he has more potential than Terry. So I don't, she's not just firing him. So
Yeah, she wanted Terry. I think overall she wanted Terry gone more than Phil.
Yeah.
Right.
Because Terry was worthless.
Okay.
The only thing that Terry didn't do is he didn't piss off the upper management.
Right.
And Phil would send emails and stuff because that's what he was accustomed to. So there was a culture change there that Phil wasn't adjusting to that probably needed to be addressed sooner.
Yeah.
But again, stuff that when Rachel was the manager, she didn't address.
Right.
Right. Okay. So final decisions. So make up your mind as who we should fire. About what the manager should do with respect to Phil and Terry. So are there any alternatives to firing Terry?
Sure, you could give him an opportunity to find the right job within the company.
It might do something for both of them.
And even both of them, I'd have them both go, if this is the job you want to do, what type of, sit down. If this is the job that's right for you, what kind of job do you really want to do? And do we have that in the company? And give them a chance to find that. And that could be part of, and if that's the right job, do they need training to go along with that so that they can have success? So try to find a way to set them up for success by moving them to another position. And if it needs training to that other position, have them go there too.
Okay.
It could still be cheaper than firing them and having to hire 2 new hires and training them and bringing them on board.
Yes. And they might thrive.
Would fire them?
They might thrive somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe Terry could be some sort of trainer. If he's a scuba dive instructor, he has that skill.
Yeah.
Maybe he could find something that he's actually good at training within the company and then go from there.
He's well liked. So yeah, but he doesn't have any analytical skills. So why is he in a position that requires a ton of analytical skills and not much skills?
Mm-hmm. So what message would firing or hiring Terry send to the other employees?
Terry? Well, I think if they were to put him on the 2.5 plan, there would probably be people upset and feel like he's being targeted because he's not able to, because he's been out and he hasn't been able to produce as much.
Terry, you asked about Terry, and that's the scuba diver.
Wait.
I think you were talking about
Terry.
Phil.
Oh, are you talking about Phil?
Terry.
No.
Terry's the one who's been
Talking
sick.
about Terry. No,
Oh,
Phil's the sick one.
totally backwards. Got it. Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay, I have no idea.
It's okay.
What was the question?
So what message would firing or not firing Terry send to the other employees?
We're no longer going to side with the buddy buddies of the CEO. We're going to do what's best for the company.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then what about Phil?
What I just said.
Yep, what you just said. Okay.
Well, with Phil, you know, it would send the message of going, just because you came here from an acquisition doesn't mean you're in the right position, and you're not going to get a job for life.
Mm-hmm. But
if you're not performing.
Without the other employees, what message would that send?
That they need to step up and perform. Because, you know, the only time they're getting rid of people is when they're doing non-performance.
Mm-hmm.
And if they'd done that before he got sick, that would have been okay. Once he got sick, then you end up in this whole quagmire of do you know, and everybody rallied behind him. Now, how do you get rid of him?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because if he was sick and you got rid of him, you're going to probably send the wrong message to the employees that you don't. It'll be a message of like you don't care.
Yeah.
Let's see. For either of them, are there any creative options that might work? I think we kind of talked a little bit about it.
Yeah, I think she's already tried creative options for her department. I think the new creative option would be seeing where else
Outside of
they
it,
fit in the
yeah.
company.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. So the rest of the story, did you guys read part 2 about what actually happened to them?
No, I
I
printed it.
did.
Okay, let's see if I can find it quickly.
Thought we were supposed to wait, but I can read it real
No,
quick.
we
I
were
almost
sort of-
did.
So let me open that up quickly. Okay, so with Terry, she did give him a 2.5, and she was very scared about it. Let's see, I sat him down before the performance review came in and said, Terry, let's talk about what is going to happen when you get your review back. I'm going to give you a 2.5. He said, what? I thought I would get a 3.0. Terry said he knew he wasn't going to get a 3.5, but he was definitely not happy about my plan. I talked to him and said that we had recently hired a lot of people who were really superstars. You can rearrange the letters, it makes upstarter. That were really superstars. I reminded him that on interviews, my no hire rate was about half of what most people's were. We now had really good people on the team, and he acknowledged this. I said things like, Terry, let's look at who we've hired. What do you think about Michael? He would say, well, Michael is a superstar. He's really great. He said the same thing about several others. This kind of depresses me. Then I said, these are the people that were hired into this team, and this is the new makeup of the team. How do you think you compare against these people on the team? He was honest and said, I couldn't do what they could do. And I said, do you want to be constantly on the edge? Do you know there is a force curve here? Do you want to be on a team where you are the weakest link on the team? Is that good for your career? You are the weakest link. Goodbye. Then I added that if I was on a team and wasn't one of the top performers, I wouldn't want to stay on the team. I said I would feel like I was spending all my time floundering. He seemed to accept that. So I said, Terry, listen, what happens after a 2.5 is that you get a PIP. I'm not going to put you on a PIP, and I don't want to put you on a PIP. I don't think it's respectful to people to put them on PIPs. I mentioned someone else who was fired, and I told Terry this guy was on a PIP and reminded him of how the guy was escorted to his office and got a half hour to clean out his desk. I said, Terry, I'm not going to let you go down that path. I like you as a person, and that's just dumb. But if you're not doing well on this team, I can tell you as both a friend and manager that for your sake, it's not a good position for you to be in. So let's skip past the PIP. Let's forget about all of that. I want to help you find a better job in the company. And if you can't find one, then why don't you go out with a party, a big bang, with your head held high so that you were never on a PIP. It was pretty heavy conversation, but he seemed, excuse me, he seemed to like the result of it at the end. I think he liked the fact that I told him PIP, that I wasn't going to do that to him. He asked how long he had, and I said, well, we will both know when you've had enough time to find another job. I'm not going to put any hard deadlines on it. Why don't you give it an honest, fair shot? I don't know what that is, maybe 3 months or something? I'm not going to give you a date, but I think that in 3 months, if there's a position for you in the company, you could find it. I told my boss what I was doing. Terry spent time looking for another job, but everyone would go and ask his peers about him, and none of them had any good feedback about Terry, so he couldn't get another job in the company. We had a big party for him. He wrote a letter to everyone saying that he was moving on to spend more time in scuba, which was his real passion. Eventually, he got a job in an engineering company and was promoted to manager. I heard he was doing a great job there because it's pure engineering, math, and equations, which don't require analytical decision making. He considered me a friend, and we kept in touch. So that's what happened with Terry. Now with Phil, it's not nearly as long and boring. Letting Phil go would have looked like we were firing him because he had been sick. Plus, he had been sick, and you don't fire a guy like that. You just rally the whole company around this guy, and everyone is so glad that he has survived, and he becomes untouchable. What happened is that when he was gone, we hired a replacement for him. And I asked HR what happened when he got better and was coming back. And HR said they would create a new slot for him. So when he came back, he had already been replaced. He was just an extra person on the team. It wasn't really a problem for me, except for the time it took to manage him. I also had to make him happy. He'd been there for a long time and had never been promoted, so I had to manage his expectations. I gave him a 3.0 on his reviews. The time it took me to manage him wasn't a big deal, so that was basically it. Because he knew my boss had a vendetta against him, he decided to leave the soft goods team when I left the company. He moved to another team. It took him because he was a free slot. I think he ended up on the international team, which was the only team that would take him, because no one wanted to work on the international team. Their job was just to take the basic product and make it French friendly or German friendly. We continued to be friends, and I heard he kept getting 3.0s. About a year later, he was diagnosed with inoperable brain cancer, and then he had to leave the company for good. He died not long after that. So that's what happened to them. Let's see. So do you think she handled the both of them well?
Yeah, because she was honest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think she was more than fair.
I think with Terry in the beginning, she was kind of like, you're dead weight, dude. What are you doing? Do you want to be dead weight?
And I think he needed to hear that.
Yeah, I think he needed to hear it too. I think he knew it, but nobody ever was that bold about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think he appreciated her honesty about that. And he could see the changes in the team that she'd been manager and they were hiring different people. So he was probably already starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable knowing that he didn't fit.
Mm-hmm. Do you think she handled Phil pretty well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with everything that came up, how it came up, I think she did.
Mm-hmm. Giving him the 3.0 instead of the 2.5 like she did Terry.
Well, when it comes down to it, Terry was a lesser employee than Phil was. So
Yeah.
he shouldn't have gotten the same score.
Mm-hmm. What she did do you think what she did was effective?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I think other people would have respected her for what she did.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and she got, I don't know, Susan, if you've ever read the Jim Collins book, where Tina was talking about it in
Oh,
our
good
last
and great.
the good and great, that you have to get the right people in the company and the wrong people out of the company. And so what she did was help him to find, and I'll be honest, when I was reading through that chapter, the first time I was like, oh my gosh, they're talking about firing people. And I was getting upset about it until there was some sentence in there that said something about you have to give them the opportunity to find something where they will flourish and be happy. And that's what he needed. Terry needed to find a spot where he really could be a great asset to someone and have the positive effects of that in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And she did that for him.
Let's see. Was there anything that she did that was not effective?
Waiting too long.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I also know, when you first take the promotion, you don't want to start the hatchet job when you first take the promotion either. But she probably could have started the documentation sooner in the process instead of waiting for the next 6-month performance review.
Right.
Okay. Let's see. So just kind of wrapping everything up. What can we learn from this case about making decisions about termination?
Document.
Yeah.
And be fair and honest with people.
So what did you learn anything that could apply to a future situation?
Same thing, that you need to document things and you need to be honest with people. And I liked, she was very blunt with Terry, but she also was I think she was very compassionate with him about, do you really want to be somewhere where you're the weakest link? Do you want to be somebody where you're the dead weight? And that is true compassion. And people know that. They know that you're looking out for their best interest, not just your team of people. They can feel how you truly feel about them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you think she would have had, so this is just my own little personal question, like, do you think she would have had the same positive results if she had spoken to Phil the way she talked to Terry?
No.
No.
I think Terry would have shut down. I mean, Phil would have shut down.
Mm-hmm.
He had a personality that was more anger. He was more angry about things. And plus he had been sick, so he would have felt completely defeated and probably would have reacted in anger.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's it for the questions, and I don't have the how did I do, so.
Oh, good.
So let's see. So I'm gonna stop the broadcast, and then we can talk a little bit about doohickeys because it's
okay.
It's weird.